So here's a question for you. Does getting viciously attacked by both the left and the right make us totally off base or exactly on track? Hey, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I'm James Peppe, and this is Pep Talks. By now, you know Pep Talks is all about offering a better way forward in the face of uncompromising extremism, not just from one side, but from both. And in today's political climate, that alone is enough to make you a target. But let's be honest. The loudest voices today aren't the wisest ones. They're just, well, the loudest, the most extreme. And that's why both sides take shots at Pep Talks, because this show speaks to the quiet center, the common sense Americans who are too busy working, raising kids, and paying the bills to spend their lives screaming on anti-social media. But for those extremes, the thought of that sleeping giant waking up, well, that just scares the hell out of me. So, taking fire from both sides, yeah, I'd say that means we're hitting the mark, wouldn't you? On Pep Talks, we're often critical of President Trump, not because he's so much worse than the other side, but because he's the one with all the power right now. And we have very real concerns about the way he uses it. So as you might imagine, we get attacked constantly by his defenders who insist on missing the point, no matter how carefully we spell it out for them. Trump's not all wrong. In fact, on several major issues, he's mostly right. But his extreme methods and his shameless dishonesty keep millions of us from being able to follow his lead. For us, the ends do not justify the means. So today, let's take a fresh look at a few key issues to better illustrate this point. Let's start with immigration, maybe the biggest issue out there today. All common sense Americans share Trump's opposition to illegal immigration. He's right to call it out. In fact, it's so obvious that only extremists on the other side could possibly disagree. For many of us, however, Trump comes across as hating all immigrants and wanting to close our borders completely. Now, common sense Americans value immigration, and we still believe in America's traditional role as the world's beacon of freedom. So if closing our borders to all immigrants is not what Trump means, then it's his responsibility as president to make that more clear. If he simply did that, simply made it clear every single time that he talked about it, that he values legal immigration and wants to fix our broken system without shutting the gates on good people, he'd unite a massive majority overnight. Forgive the spoiler, but that's one half of Trump's problem for millions of common sense Americans. The right idea, the wrong approach. And it's a pattern that shows up time and time again on issues like crime, elections, and the culture wars. Let's take crime, for instance. Trump's instinct to act tough appeals strongly to common sense Americans. Who doesn't want safe streets? In fact, if there are only choices, many of us will take too tough on crime over too soft every day of the week. At the same time, however, common sense Americans also understand the fundamental importance of the rule of law and due process, and we're not willing to sacrifice them on the altar of short-term safety. So when Trump uses the military to police our own cities, or he ignores the courts in his bull in a china shop rush to deport, he crosses those constitutional red lines. Look, we don't need soldiers in our neighborhoods, and we don't need masked agents snatching people off the street and kicking them off planes in the third world. We need effective, common sense leadership that works within the law, leveraging popular support to press reluctant, partisan mayors and governors to fulfill their primary responsibility, which is protecting their citizens. And while we have little sympathy for the criminals Trump says he is targeting, we respect the wisdom that reminds us those who would trade freedom for the promise of safety will soon enjoy neither. Regarding our elections, Trump's right again. Our current system has very real problems. Cheating absolutely happens. I've experienced it firsthand. and it's often associated with mail-in and extended voting. Here's the way it happened in my campaign for state senate. Within the voting window, my opponent and his operatives showed up at the doors of voters who had requested mail-in ballots. There, they casually acted like official election workers, as opposed to partisan campaigners, whose job was to make sure ballots were received and to assist confused voters. In countless instances, they literally led voters line by line through the ballot, subtly, or not so subtly perhaps, influencing their selections. At the end, they politely offered to save the voters the trouble of mailing the ballots by collecting them right there and hand delivering them to City Hall. I'll leave it to you to guess what happened to the ballots with check marks next to my name. It's called ballot harvesting, and it's illegal, but it's also damn near impossible to prove. But it's what sophisticated partisan campaigns on both sides do to ensure victory in local districts where races are often decided by literally handfuls of votes. So yes, Trump is right when he insists that election cheating occurs. But then he turns around and grossly exaggerates the extent of it, claiming implausibly massive conspiracies with no proof whatsoever, all because his ego won't let him admit he lost. And in so doing, he undermines his credibility on the subject with millions of common sense Americans. He distracts attention away from the legitimate reasons for simple, reasonable reform. And he destroys trust in the entire system, even among his own voters, in a way that's dangerous for us all. We can fix this, not by federalizing elections, but by working state by state to restore same-day voting, implement common sense voter ID, end partisan redistricting once and for all, and reinforce fair, nonpartisan oversight across the board. Now, with respect to the escalating culture wars, another big one. Once again, Trump taps into something very real. Millions upon millions of common sense Americans are tired of being told what to say and how to think and feel. Tripping over a word in our constantly changing, politically correct language doesn't make us all racists, or homophobes, or transphobes, or xenophobes, or any kind of phobes for that matter. Still, too many of us do feel super anxious that such a slip could get us unfairly labeled and fired from our jobs, ostracized in our communities, or even put in jail for a hate crime. Once again, however, Trump's approach is destructive instead of constructive. With a tremendous opportunity to reunify our nation around common sense norms, he chooses instead to divide us further by angrily and unconscionably pitting us against one another, by demonizing and vilifying anyone who dissents, by legitimizing vicious attacks upon his political adversaries, painting them as dangerous enemies of the people, and by openly reveling in his perpetual campaigns of personal retribution behind the full force of our government. We can fight back against political correctness without turning the same dishonest tactics of the other side against them, becoming just like the woke bullies Trump claims to oppose. And we can stand up for free speech and meritocracy without resorting to scare tactics or mocking and demonizing our fellow citizens who simply see the world differently than we do. Trump's not all wrong. In fact, on policy, he gets a lot right. But his ends justify the means approach consistently undermines the very values he claims to defend. And even when common sense Americans find ourselves in agreement with him on policy direction, his shameless dishonesty makes it impossible for us to trust that he really means it. And that's the other half of Trump's problem for millions of us. Honesty and trust matters to us a lot. We've seen him dramatically flip-flop. We've seen him notoriously back down, constantly extending or outright ignoring his own deadline. And we've seen him casually break promises while pretending he never made them in the first place. That's what keeps common sense Americans at arm's length from Trump. And that's what's standing between the minority support he has consistently maintained and the potential for an overwhelming popular mandate that could seriously transform our nation for the better. So yes, getting attacked from both the left and the right is proof positive that we're on the correct track. That's what makes Pep Talks America's voice of common sense. The Common Sense Majority knows America can and must do better. We can fortify our borders and manage healthy immigration. We can be tough on crime while defending the rule of law. We can increase election security without undermining democracy. And we can restore cultural unity through civil engagement. All of this we can and must do because lasting progress will never be achieved by being better liars, cheaters, and lawbreakers than our political adversaries. It can only be secured with courage, truth, integrity, and yes, timeless common sense. So, on that note, to my fellow Common Sense Americans, keep looking, but don't wait for better leaders. You are precisely what our great nation needs in this critical moment. So don't go along blindly. If you've been playing the lesser of two evils game, stop. The first step to taking back our power and redirecting our nation is to withhold our support from those who are unworthy of it. I promise, the difference between bad and worse is hardly any difference at all. And this is the only way they will begin to get the message. Now is the time. Raise your voice, act with decency, and show the corrupt power establishment what real power looks like. That is how we will reclaim our country and return it to a path that will make our children proud. Until next time, remember everybody, stay proud, get loud, and keep coming back to Pep Talks. I'll see y'all again real soon.